Hey, this is Troy Stavros with Doorbell Real Estate, and today I want to talk a little bit about whether now is a good time to buy a home. Are we in a housing bubble? The questions that everybody is asking themselves, especially if you are a buyer, maybe if you're a home seller, maybe if you are a real estate agent. And the reason I say that is that what spurred me to talk about this was a post that was in a real estate group that I am part of on Facebook. And this was the question that was asked by another agent. It says, "Is now really a good time to buy? Let's talk about it." I preface this with I don't have years and years of experience, so I'm looking for different perspectives and insight. Let's educate one another. Interest rates are low, great, but is that enough for people to spend $30,000 over appraised values, to go through all this insane bidding wars, to see homes in the same neighborhood sell just 8 months prior for $150,000 less than the listed home? And sure, you can tell me a home is worth whatever someone is willing to pay for it, sure, but at what point do people stop and think, wow, this is crazy, I'm going to sit this one out for now, and who knows, maybe no one even gets to that point. I mean, those are all good points, and that's something that we are definitely seeing in the market. So I just wanted to respond first off with what my response was to that, and then also kind of dig into the data a little bit to talk about why I responded that way. So you can see my response below, which was, we know that interest rates are still historically low and projected to increase. So when looking at this factor, waiting will cost them more later, as interest rates will be higher in the future, pushing their payment higher if they aren't paying with cash. We also know that inventory is historically low, with no massive wave of inventory hitting the market anytime soon. Supply and demand dictate that as long as there is a demand and supply is low, prices will continue to rise. We all know the demand is there, as not only are we dealing with large amounts of local buyers, but then add the huge influx of out-of-state buyers to the mix. Therefore, waiting to buy will cost them, as prices will be higher in the future. So if both interest rates and prices are projected to rise, waiting will doubly hurt their affordability in the future. So there, you got my answer to her question. And it was interesting that she said she hasn't been in the market very long, and she's concerned because she sees this happening. And this is definitely, there's historic things happening in the market right now, but we have to be able to look at what the data is telling us. We have to be able to look at what has happened in the past. And, you know, now when people look in the past, so many of them are looking at what happened in 2007, 2008, when we had the big market crash. That's the biggest thing on their mind. And they're like, whoa, prices are going crazy again. This must be the same thing happening again. But it's not. There's so many differences between what is happening now as opposed to what happened then. And that's what I want to talk about. A recent survey, and she's not alone in thinking this, and there's plenty of buyers out there and folks that are thinking the same thing, because a recent survey from the National Association of Realtors revealed that many consumers believe there's a housing bubble beginning to form. And that's understandable because of what we just talked about. So this is what the article said. It says, 77% of consumers believe we are in a housing bubble. The new survey shows that real estate agents are more confident about the state of the market than many consumers. 77% of home buyers and sellers say they believe there's a housing price bubble where they live, and that's according to a Redfin consumer survey of about 1,500 respondents. On the other hand, less than half, 44% of real estate agents say they believe there's a housing bubble in their market, with the rest feeling far more confident about the state of the market. And you can see that just in what I've told you already. Here's one agent that isn't sure what's going on, but here's me telling you that I don't think we have a housing bubble, and I'm going to explain why. And then it goes on to say, over the last year, many leading housing economists have said that while housing prices are indeed rising quickly, this isn't a housing bubble, bearing little resemblance to the booming market conditions that led to a financial crisis in the mid-2000s. Housing bubbles occur when home prices reach unsustainable growth. They eventually burst when demand can no longer justify the rapidly rising home prices. Sharp price declines can result. But this is not 2006. Housing inventories are low, credit remains tight, and lenders aren't issuing risky loans as they did back then. Home buyers and sellers are rightfully concerned about how fast prices are rising, especially those who remember the housing market crash during the Great Recession, says Daryl Fairweather, Redfin's chief economist. What we're going through right now is closer to a ripple in the water than a bubble. Mortgage rates are already going up, which will likely stabilize demand and reduce the risk of a bubble that could burst. Then it goes on to say home prices are expected to slow in 2022. National Association of Realtors predicts price growth to moderate to 3 to 5% in 2022, much lower than the 16% annual growth that we saw through December of 2021. So they're saying prices will increase. They're just not going to increase as much. So that being said, let's look at the data. Now, we have to remember when we're looking at something like this, it's important to look at the facts. And we're going to look at how right now is different than it was during the last housing bubble and what is different and why it's not the same and why what we're in now is not a housing bubble and that it's a naturally formed thing with supply and demand. Let's take a look. Okay. So houses are not unaffordable like they were during the housing boom. When we were in the housing boom, the affordability formula has three components. There's the price of the home, wages earned by the purchaser, and the mortgage rate available at the time. Conventional lending standards say a purchaser should not spend more than 28% of their gross income on their mortgage payment. So 15 years ago, prices were high, wages were low, and mortgage rates were over 6%. Today, prices are still high. Wages, however, have increased, and the mortgage rate, even after the recent spike, is still well below 6%. That means that the average purchaser today pays less of their monthly income towards their mortgage payment than they did back then. In the latest affordability report by Adam Data, they said the average wage earner can still afford the typical home across the U.S., but the financial comfort zone continues shrinking as home prices keep soaring and mortgage rates tick upward. So affordability isn't as strong as it was last year, but it's still much better than it was during the boom. And this chart shows that. This shows homes that are more affordable today than they were in 2007. The monthly principal and interest payment as a percentage of income required to purchase the average priced home with 20% down. So normal lending standards, 28%. In 2007, you were having to pay 34.1%. And today, we are below the normal lending standard and at 25.8%. So if costs were so prohibitive, how did so many homes sell during the housing boom in 2007? So right now, we're actually more affordable than we were then. Next, mortgage standards were much more relaxed during the housing boom. During the housing boom, it was much easier to get a mortgage than it is today. As an example, let's review the number of mortgages granted to purchasers with credit scores under 620. According to credit.org, a credit score between 550 and 619 is considered poor. In defining those with a credit score below 620, they explain credit agencies consider consumers with credit delinquencies, account rejections, and little credit history as subprime borrowers due to their credit risk. So that is the definition of what somebody under a 620 credit score is. That is someone with credit delinquencies, account rejections, and little credit history. So buyers can still qualify for a mortgage with a credit score that low, but they're considered riskier borrowers. Here's a graph that we're looking at now that's showing the mortgage volume issued to purchasers with credit score less than 620 during the housing boom and the subsequent volume in the 14 years since. Well, you can see 2003, 2007, those subprime mortgages were extremely higher than they are from 2008 to today. So mortgage standards are nothing like they were the last time. Purchasers that acquired a mortgage over the last decade are much more qualified. And let's take a look at what that means going forward. So the next thing we want to talk about is foreclosures. The foreclosure situation is nothing like it was during the crash. This is kind of where a lot of people are thinking, okay, it's going to crash. There's going to be a bunch of foreclosures that hit the market, but that's just not the case. The most obvious difference is the number of homeowners that were facing foreclosure after the housing bubble burst. The Federal Reserve issues a report showing the number of consumers with a new foreclosure notice. Here are the numbers during the crash compared to today. So the 4 years of the housing crash, 2007 to 2010, saw spikes in those facing foreclosure. When we look at the last 4 years, 2018 to 2021, you can see how much lower that is. So there isn't a big influx of homes that are going to hit the market because of foreclosures. Now, there's no doubt the 2020 and 2021 numbers are impacted by the forbearance program, which was created to help homeowners facing uncertainty during the pandemic. However, there are fewer than 800,000 homeowners left in the program today, and most of those will be able to work out a repayment plan with their banks. Rick Sharga, who's the executive vice president of Realty Track, says, quote, "The fact that foreclosure starts declined despite hundreds of thousands of borrowers exiting the CARES Act mortgage forbearance program over the last few months is very encouraging. It suggests that the forbearance equals foreclosure narrative was incorrect." So he's basically saying that just because people were in forbearance does not mean that they are going to go into foreclosure. So why are there so few foreclosures now? Well, today, homeowners are equity rich. They're not tapped out like they were after the housing boom and everything busted and houses were worth less than what people owed on them. In the run-up to the housing bubble, some owners were using their homes as personal ATM machines. Many immediately withdrew their equity once it built up. When home values began to fall, some owners found themselves in a negative equity situation where the amount they owed on the mortgage was greater than the value of their home. Some of those households decided to walk away from their homes, and that led to a rash of distressed property listings, foreclosures, short sales, which sold at huge discounts, thus lowering the value of other homes in the area. Homeowners, however, have learned their lesson. Prices have risen nicely over the last few years, leading to over 40% of homes in the country having more than 50% equity. But owners have been tapping into it. They have not been tapping into it like the last time, as evidenced by the fact that the national tappable equity has increased to a record $9.9 trillion. That's how much equity is available out there to be tapped by homeowners. With the average home equity now standing at $300,000, what happened the last time won't happen today. As the latest Home Equity Insights report from CoreLogic explains, quote, "Not only have equity gains helped homeowners more seamlessly transition out of forbearance and avoid a distressed sale, but they've also enabled many to continue building their wealth." So there will be nowhere near the same number of foreclosures as we saw during the crash. So what does that mean for the housing market? Let's look at the next point. We don't have a surplus of homes on the market. We have a shortage of homes on the market. The supply of inventory needed to sustain a normal real estate market is approximately 6 months. Anything more than that is an overabundance and will cause prices to depreciate. Anything less than that is a shortage and will lead to continued price appreciation. As the next graph shows that we're looking at, there were too many homes for sale from 2007 to 2010. many of which were the short sales and foreclosures we were just talking about. And that caused a huge tumble in prices. Today, there's a shortage of inventory, which I'm sure if you're a buyer, you realize, which is causing the acceleration in home values to continue. Supply and demand, basically like what we've been talking about if you've listened to any of the other things that I've put on video. Today, we are dealing with a supply and demand issue. Inventory is nothing like the last time. Prices are rising because there's a healthy demand for home ownership, and at the same time, there's a shortage of homes for sale. So if you're worried that you're going to be making the same mistake as what happened in 2007, 2008, hopefully this information is enough to show you that what is happening today is nothing like what happened when we had the housing bubble in 2007, 2008. And today is a natural run-up that is caused by supply and demand. Now, that being said, mortgage rates are slowly starting to increase. So as mortgage rates increase, affordability will start to shrink, but we're still, as we saw from the graph earlier, well below that 6% we were back during the housing boom. So still a great time to buy a home. The longer you wait, the less affordable it will be, because we know from what we've seen here is that prices are increasing and interest rates are increasing. That is a double whammy for affordability. So it's going to be cheaper to buy one now than it is to wait. So hopefully this has been informative. If you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always here to help you. My team is always here to help you. We look forward to doing anything we can to answer questions and get you into a house, or if you have a house to sell, we just look forward to helping in any way that we can. We are here to serve you. Here is a short video that just gives a summary on what I've talked about, but don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions.